Welcome back to Fruitful Gardening. My name is Andrea and today we are out in the garden. I've got my little basket. There are a lot of tomatoes that are starting to turn, and I do pull my tomatoes right when they start turning. I've got lots of bugs and lots of birds that like to hang out in these trees here, the pecan trees. And so if I don't get them early, then the birds and the bugs definitely will. So we're gonna come over here and I'm gonna start picking some tomatoes. These are Wisconsin 55 tomatoes, and I'm actually really impressed with them. They seem to be doing really good, putting on a lot of tomatoes. They are not huge tomatoes, but if you look at this tomato, it's still kind of green, but if you see how it's not green anymore, it's starting to turn. I do pull mine like this. This one's a little more red, well, orange. And what I do with these tomatoes is I put them in a brown paper bag with all the other tomatoes that I pick. And once they start turning red, I take them out of the brown paper bag and put them on the windowsill for them to finish ripening. And that helps to get them ripe pretty quick. And they're still delicious. It is true that if you leave the tomato on the vine and let it ripen on the vine, it might have a little more flavor. But these are still perfectly fine picked like this and letting them ripen inside. They still have a lot of flavor. And for me, in my area, in the south, humid, it's just, this is what I have to do. I wouldn't get any tomatoes if I left them on the vine. The bugs would just get them, and the birds. So probably a little caterpillar or something got in that one. I just throw that to the bird yard. Same thing, something ate that one. And you can see that it's starting to turn. When they're green, the bugs and things usually leave them alone. It's when they start to turn. So these are tomatillos right here. I haven't got any tomatillos yet, but we're gonna go pick some of these tomatoes. And I pick them pretty early too. So half of this is still a green color, the other half of it is starting to turn. But if you put it in a brown paper bag with other tomatoes that are at different stages, then they will start to ripen. I like that size. That's a pretty good sized tomato. This one's no good. And I'll still keep ones that are splitting. Just a little splitting, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still edible. Maybe not for canning, but you can definitely still use that. Cut that part out. The ones I just picked down here at the end, these are Rutgers. So compared to the other one, they're a little bit bigger. Quite a bit bigger actually. It's kind of got a yucky spot. This one actually might be rotten because something dug into there, but I will wait and see when I cut it open and when it's ready, when it's red. But so that's the size difference from the Wisconsin 55 Rutgers. So now I'm going to go down this row and pick the pink ox heart. So this one's just starting to turn, but look at that beautiful shape. And then, so that's the size comparison. Pink ox heart, Rutgers, Wisconsin 55. And the size of a tomato can really depend on a lot of things. Just because my Wisconsin 55 tomato is this size doesn't mean that your tomato would be that size, or my pink ox heart. It depends on how many tomatoes you leave on the vine. If you leave more tomatoes on the vine, they're not gonna get as big. That's why if you want a like huge tomato, you trim it back to only a couple tomatoes once the flowers are out, and then you will get a bigger tomato. I haven't taken any flowers off of any of these or thinned the fruit or anything like that. But if you want the biggest, most jumbo tomato, then that's what you would do to get that, because it would put a lot more energy into growing the size of that 1 or 2 tomatoes that you leave on the vine, rather than like I leave all the tomatoes and these are the sizes. Also, it has to do with soil conditions, climate. There's just so many different things that go into gardening. So even though we see things of other people growing different things and maybe what they have, or even what it says on the seed packet that something is supposed to do, you can't always expect that when you grow something. Your conditions are different, the way you're growing it might be different, the soil might be different, maybe nutrients might be off or different than where the seed came from. The climate is definitely different. So you have to take that as you want to. Yes, there is some truth, there's truth to what they say on seed packets, but you can't get discouraged if yours don't turn out exactly like what the seed packet says, or exactly like what someone else grew that you saw growing it. I'm gonna see if there's any more tomatoes on these pink ox heart that I can get. This one has some caterpillar poop on it, but I don't see any bite marks. But you can see these are both pink ox heart. And even the size on these is different. So you can't expect every tomato to be the same size. This one looks a little funky. I'm not exactly sure what happened to him, but you can cut that part out to use. This is my first ever straw flower that's blooming. I think they are so pretty. They're not fully bloomed yet, but they are gorgeous. And then here's my dahlia. It's not exactly the prettiest looking flower, but maybe if it grows a little more, puts off some more flowers, it'll look better. But I am so excited about that straw flower. I've never grown that before, and I saw it on somebody else's YouTube, and I thought that they were so beautiful, and I love the idea that they actually are for drying. They're good drying flowers, so I'm gonna see if I can dry some of those. Let's go over here to a different bed and see what tomatoes we can find. This plant is a Bonnie Best. It is the only one. I planted them all through this row. It's the only one that has a lot of tomatoes on it, and they just didn't do very well. I'm not sure why or what happened to these. But here's their size. I'm not sure if that's the size they're supposed to be, but they're pretty much the same as the Wisconsin 55, maybe a little smaller. I can't really judge them because they really just haven't been growing and doing very well, so maybe this, you know, they're not supposed to be this small. It might be something going on. But it does have a lot of tomatoes on this one plant. I mean, that's a pretty good bit. I do come out here, and when I see flowers out, I just shake them like this to pollinate them. When you're in a humid place, the pollen on the flowers can get sticky if it's kind of moist, and so I noticed that a lot of my tomatoes, I was seeing lots of flowers but not a lot of tomatoes, so I do go through the garden probably every day and just flick all the flowers and try and knock that pollen around so that I can get the most tomatoes. And I'm sure in places that aren't humid, that's not even necessary because the wind or it shaking or anything or a bug can pollinate the flowers. But in a humid environment, and I just learned that a few days ago, I didn't know that. But I have just, for the past 2 weeks, been coming out and just shaking the little flowers so that they get pollinated. I'm gonna check right here for any peppers on these little jalapeno plants. They seem pretty small, so I think I'm going to leave those. So the ones on this plant are a little too small, but the ones on this plant, I could harvest some. So I got a few little jalapenos. I've got a red bell pepper here that's actually starting to turn. So I'm going to leave that on and see if I can't get it to turn red. This bed here is my cherry tomatoes. And so I'm going to go down this side and see if there's any tomatoes that I can pick. I also have serranos in here that are coming in real nice. So hopefully soon I'll have some serranos. I didn't know this, but I actually did still have a black cherry tomato plant over here. I thought that I only planted one and it was the one that died and I had to rip it out. But apparently I still have a black cherry tomato. And these aren't all the way ripe. They've still got green shoulders. But I will just put these little ones on the windowsill and they'll ripen up in no time. So this is really weird, but these are both supposed to be the same tomato. One is huge. So I've got these like 2 different sized cherries coming off of this. It's a yellow gooseberry tomato plant. They're delicious. I love yellow tomatoes. And it's called yellow gooseberry. But I think maybe it's cross-pollinating with this. This is one of my favorite cherry tomatoes is the Tommy Toe. This was the first tomato that I ever grew, was the Tommy Toe tomato, and it has very high production, delicious tomato. And I haven't grown it in years, but I decided this year I could grow it again. So got some cherries. There is one really funny thing over here that I have to show you. So if you see how tall I am, this is my fence, the top of my fence. I planted marigolds at the bottom down here, and I guess it's too shady, so they're like shooting up trying to get to the sun. This is a marigold. This is how tall it is. That is crazy. It is super funny. I have never seen a marigold that tall before. But it's shooting for the sun and it says, I am gonna grow. These right here are my best looking tomatoes. They don't have any disease or anything, although I see a hornworm has been chewing on this one, so that's new. I will have to find him later and kill him. But it's Peron sprayless, and there's a tomato I see that's ready to be picked. They have all been this size. So compared to the Wisconsin 55 and the pink ox heart, not as big, but this is a really good sized tomato. And they have good, there's just a lot of tomatoes on here and they look really good. I do, like I said, come out and shake the flowers so that I get good pollination. But I really, really like this Peron sprayless just because of how good the tomato plants look. I'll show you. So there's not really that much yellowing. And that's actually the reason I grew these, was because I read that they are supposed to do really good at disease resistance and be good for my kind of climate. So that's why I grew these. Okay, we're on to the next bed. There's actually not any tomatoes that are ready in this bed, but I will show you what they're looking like. These here are the green zebra tomatoes, so these will stay green. So that will be interesting to see if the bugs like this one or not, and the birds. And then I've got this huge, this is a Ajvarsky pepper. And so I'm gonna wait for that one to turn red, but that looks so delicious. And of course, I gotta come through and clip some basil. And I think I'm probably gonna be able to get some okra. So I'm just gonna get that stuff real quick. There's a few other herbs that we need to get to. There's some oregano, but here's the basil. So it does have flowers on it. I don't mind if it has flowers on it when I'm gonna be dehydrating it, but I'm gonna check this bed and see if there's any tomatoes in here. These are Celebrity, they're actually the hybrid. They're not looking great. None of those are really turning, but this is a nice big one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and take it. I don't wanna take any chances. These have been really eaten up by bugs if I leave them out here. And then there is one thing over here that we are gonna get today. This is my very first cantaloupe. It's a Minnesota midget. It's kind of splitting at the bottom, but I have never successfully grown one to size. I grew these in my very first garden that I ever had, and they were like really small, but they were ripe. I didn't have good soil. I didn't know anything about gardening. I just used pots and put seeds in pots, and so I grew the Minnesota midget, and it was the sweetest, most delicious cantaloupe I have ever tasted. And cantaloupe are one of my kids' favorites. So I am so excited about this. It's not that big, like as far as cantaloupes go, but this is what it's supposed to be, because Minnesota midget is a smaller. See, this was on the ground, so this one fell off. But look at that. I will still cut this and see if we can eat it. I'm not exactly sure what happened here. But I did go through and pollinate all these flowers because I love cantaloupe and I really wanted some more. The vines look good, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna get a lot off of it. but this is the best. Even though it's only one. It's gonna be delicious. Okay, now let's go. I think that's all I can get in this garden. I'm gonna go to the other garden, and there's some herbs over there that we need to get. There's basil and oregano. This is my oregano, and I've already cut it like 3 times, but you wanna cut it as much as you can because it'll grow back more and more. So there's a good bit of oregano. Some of it was starting to flower. There's some basil right here. I'm just gonna go ahead and snip this. Oh man, look at that. I didn't see that one over here when it was turning, so the bugs got it. I'm gonna go ahead and take those 2. So there's the basil. This is actually lettuce leaf basil, and the one that we picked in the other garden, that one was lemon basil. So there's a couple cherry tomatoes here on this Super Sweet 100. I'm gonna get those. So here's one tomato, but look at this cute little tomato. He's so tiny. This is spearmint that I got from someone. I went to their house and they dug it up for me, which was so nice. So I'm gonna snip the tops of this spearmint. Man, spearmint smells so good. I love it. This back here is the lemongrass. So I'm gonna chop a couple of those also. I think you only use the bottom part, and it's actually really tough. I have used lemongrass to cook with, and I love the flavor of it when I grew it one year. The one I had a few years ago died, but you can't cook this down. It is super, super thick. But I was thinking it would be good for teas and stuff, so I'll have to research it a little, but I'm just gonna take this one inside. It smells like lemon. This is the last herb. This is lemon balm, which I completely chopped it down a few weeks ago because it was looking really yucky and it started seeding. But now it looks beautiful. I would say my basket is pretty full. It's actually really heavy. I'm gonna have to hold the bottom. There goes the lemongrass, that's okay. So we got lemon basil, oregano, lettuce leaf basil, lemon balm, and spearmint today, with of course a lot of tomatoes and one super delicious looking cantaloupe that we will probably be eating today. So even though I'm out here cutting these herbs today, all of these herbs are gonna grow back, and I'm gonna be able to cut them again multiple times before they're done for the season. So once it gets cold, the basil and the lemon balm will be gone. The oregano will come back next year. I have thyme over there, and this whole thing right here is thyme. And then there is parsley planted right here that the caterpillars ate. But usually when they eat it, it does come back. And once it cools off and the caterpillars are gone, that parsley will probably come back, and then I'll be able to start picking that. And the parsley actually here in my area, it survives all winter. It doesn't actually grow big and bushy until spring, but it does survive all winter. The only other herb that I have planted that I didn't actually harvest is cilantro, because I don't dehydrate the cilantro. I only use that for things when I'm making like tacos and salsas and things like that. I will pick it fresh because cilantro doesn't translate to being dehydrated very well. Not for me anyway. And I love the flavor of it fresh. It's one of my favorite herbs. Oh, and the lemon balm. That's another thing that should come back next year. This is actually its second year. This lemon balm right here, the first year it barely grew at all. I thought it wasn't going to survive, and I've tried growing it for years. I think 3 years I planted lemon balm seeds, and this was the first year that it actually came back, its second year. And so I'm pretty sure that that will stay there and it will survive the winter, which it's not going to be producing anything in the winter, but it will come back in the spring from the roots. Herbs are one of my favorite things to grow. They produce over and over and over again, and usually they're not pest prone, not horribly. I mean, of course the caterpillars got the parsley, but that's part of the game. That's one thing that does get eaten. And then the basil sometimes will get eaten also, but it's so resilient. That's why you can pick it. Every time it grows, you pick it and it'll come back. Same thing with the bugs. If the bugs get it, as long as it's not dead, they don't kill it. But if they eat all the leaves or eat holes in the leaves, it's still going to continue to grow. So I've got to get in the house and get some stuff washed up. I'm going to put the tomatoes in a brown paper bag and get all these herbs in the dehydrator. So I am so glad you came out here with me in the garden today, and we got to harvest a lot of stuff. It's a beautiful day today. It's only 82 degrees, which compared to the past couple of weeks is very nice. In the shade at least. It's still hot in the sun, but there is a breeze blowing, and we just had fun in the garden today. So I thank you for being with me. I thank y'all for watching. I hope you like and subscribe, and I will talk to y'all on the next one.